Thank you. And good morning, students. And you're from South Seminole Academy in Florida, right? Excellent.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Oh, you good? All right. We'll give it just a second. But we can do introductions sort of while things get set up, just so we can stay on track. So welcome. Good morning. I'm Jen Patia Howell. I am the co-executive director of Virginia Civics, which is the home of the Virginia We the People program. And my fellow judges will introduce themselves now.
Good morning. My name is Tom Tinder, and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
Good morning. My name is Emmanuel Caudillo, I'm a senior advisor with the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative here in Washington, D.C. Good to see you today.
All right. And are we ready on your side for introductions?
Yeah, go ahead. Jordan, introduce yourself. And Eugenia's joining us from her softball game. So sorry.
No,
but go ahead, guys. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm with Unit. I'm in 8th grade, South Seminole.
Hi, I'm Eugenia McCormick, and I'm an 8th grader at South Seminole Academy.
Great. All right, and I see we've got your teacher here as well. So hello and welcome. Jordan, your audio broke up just a little bit during your introduction. So I just wanted to flag that in case it happens, we might, have you turn your camera off or something just to open up the bandwidth, but we'll get going. So I'll read the whole question and then time will start whenever you're ready. We're doing question number 1. In the Virginia plan, James Madison proposed proportional representation in both houses of Congress. The delegates rejected Madison's proposal in favor of the Great Compromise. What is the Great Compromise and how was it justified? Do you think the founders' justification is acceptable today? Why or why not? What are the advantages and disadvantages of equal representation in the Senate? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of changing the Senate to proportional representation? You can start when you're ready.
To begin, the founding fathers of the United States created the Great Compromise in 1787. The Great Compromise involved many factors of proportional and equal representation. The Great Compromise, the New Jersey Plan, and the Virginia Plan all related to the advantages and disadvantages of equal representation and proportional representation in Congress. The justification of the Great Compromise can be argued, but we believe it is justified. Firstly, the greatest advantage of equal representation in Congress is that the smaller states are not ignored and have a say in the United States Congress. This is supported by the New Jersey Plan. All 9 sections of the New Jersey Plan were created to ensure 1 vote per state in Congress, which would be 1 house. There is also an obvious disadvantage to equal representation in Congress, and it is that with more representation in smaller states comes less representation for the amount of people in larger states. For example, the Virginia Plan states, resolved therefore that the right of suffrage in the national legislature ought to be proportioned to the quotas of contribution or the number of free inhabitants, as one or the other rule may seem best in different cases. Moreover, James Madison and other supporters of proportional representation were suggesting that Congress needs to be organized by the number of free people in that state, and that this does not only help the South, but also helps the North. This is a disadvantage to equal representation because it shows that proportional representation, as written in the Virginia Plan, is good for both the South and the North. On the topic of slavery, there is the 3/5 Compromise that applies clearly to the Virginia Plan, not counting slaves. The 3/5 Compromise states that 3 out of every 5 slaves counts towards representation. This could be viewed as an advantage to equal representation. Furthermore, as you can see, the Great Compromise is a wonderful amalgamation of the New Jersey and Virginia plans.
The Great Compromise was a proposition where there would be proportional representation between small states and large states. This compromise provided for a bicameral federal legislation. The House of Representatives would have proportional representation from the states, and the Senate would have equal representation. What if the Senate had proportional representation? There would be some disadvantages and advantages. From a positive perspective, larger states have more representation because their population is bigger. However, one example of a disadvantage would be that if the Senate were to have proportional representation, smaller states would most likely be ignored. Following behind its party establishment, having an increasing amount of control would be quite unfavorable. Both the North and the South benefited from the Virginia plan. Since each state would be represented by the number of people in that state, in our modern government, we have bicameral legislation in Congress thanks to the Great Compromise. The justification that the founding fathers had for the Great Compromise is that it gave each state equal representation and proportional representation, therefore keeping the smaller and larger states happy. This gave us the Senate and House of Representatives. But is this justification acceptable and reasonable today? We'd say it is. There are many differences between 1787 and 2021, but one thing that has not changed at all is the need for representation in a strong government within the US. As my teammates earlier explained, one plan versus the other would only end up benefiting some people over the other. And that's just not what our democracy is about. With so much political divide in the present on issues like abortion, gun control, political parties, and other controversial topics, the bicameral legislation helps us make sure that people with different groups, with different opinions, get the representation on these important topics that they deserve. So yes, the justification for the Great Compromise is acceptable today. Thank you for listening. We will now take your follow-up questions.
Excellent, thank you. So I hear you, you're saying that you think that the reasoning behind the Great Compromise was justified. Can you think of any reasons why it wouldn't be? So what would be the arguments against it, in your opinion?
Well, it was a compromise. So I guess an argument against it would be that one side got more power than the other, because some people think that the Senate is more important than the House of Representatives in like deciding on different issues. So I think that there are different arguments against it and whatnot about the states and the amount of representation they will get.
I agree with my teammate Jordan in the sense that it was a compromise, and there were definitely things that one side could argue that it wasn't justified because of. Like the South could argue it wasn't justified because they have less population and they didn't like proportional representation at the time. And the North could argue that with equal representation, they didn't get the amount of justification they needed. So each side could argue there was something not justified about it, because a compromise, there always are things that are not going to be good with one side, but because there are some things that are good with both, the sides manage to get over the non-justified parts of the compromise.
You all stated that the New Jersey plan was to have one house. And interestingly, we have one of our states, Nebraska, that just has one house, unicameral legislature. They seem to be doing okay. Why do you think that other states did not follow Nebraska's lead and go with a unicameral legislature, one house, rather than bicameral, having both a House and a Senate?
I think that the other states didn't follow Nebraska's lead with a unicameral system because, for one, our federal government and our founders did come to the conclusion that a bicameral system would be best for all states in the United States as a whole. So the House of Representatives is supposed to be closer to the people, and the Senate is supposed to be closer to the government. They have two different functions, and the people need to be heard in the House of Representatives, but the legislature also needs to keep in mind what the government wants. And I think that's why many states decided to go with a bicameral system instead of a unicameral system like Nebraska.
I completely agree with Eugenia. I want to add on to the fact that different things work for different states. And if a state feels a bicameral legislation works better than a unicameral legislation for them, then that's what they have.
Thank you.
So my question here is, should we make the Constitution, should we change the Constitution to make representation in the Senate based on population? Why or why not?
No, I do not believe that we should change our, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. No, I do not believe that we should change our Senate to proportional representation, because if we did, then the smaller states, like, I don't know, either way, the smaller states that have a lower population, like Nebraska, for example, and states of that sort that are smaller and therefore have a smaller population, would not be represented, and they would almost be ignored due to what the founders said and how they justified it. The smaller states would become ignored possibly by the federal government if we change that to proportional. And I think it's important that we have each state getting represented the same amount.
All right, thank you. So next question I have is, how does equal representation in the Senate affect you and your state? Can you think of examples of how Florida has had advantages or disadvantages of equal representation in the Senate? So maybe thinking of it a little more theoretically, if you're talking about big states and small states and how, each one is benefited by equal representation, where does Florida lay in that spectrum of big and small? And so how do you feel represented in your government?
Well, Florida has always had like a pretty good population size. So in terms of representation, I think we're doing pretty well with our senators and our House of Representatives based on population. So I can't really think of any disadvantages that we would have. And as for advantages, I'm not really sure in that area.
Okay.
Let me ask this question. You mentioned about political parties, and we have two main political parties. Should we have more main political parties, an active third party or an active fourth party? Why or why not?
Well,
I
right
believe
now,
we should have, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I believe we should.
Go ahead, Eugenia.
Can I go? Okay.
Yes.
I believe that we should have more political parties, because really with two, it divides our country, in my opinion, and divides our states. And also we have 50 states, so it can be divided completely in half, really, if 25 and 25, if half of the country likes one party and the other half agrees with the other. So I think it's dividing our country, and with more parties, there would be more opinions.
I wholeheartedly agree with Eugenia on that one. It's become about red and blue and recently, and I think we have too many problems with like polarization. So it's just, I feel like political parties, there could be more, and I think we would really benefit if there are more different opinions and different people were to have their parties.
Right. All right, thank you. We have some feedback for you before we let you go. I enjoyed our conversation, and I really appreciate that Eugenia, that is, that you guys are so dedicated. I know you've got a lot going on, but you're making this work, and you're giving up time on your weekend to come have these conversations with us. That is amazing. I enjoyed our discussion. I think I particularly liked the way you reasoned through that last question about parties. And I won't steal my fellow judge's feedback on that because it was his question, but I just want to say I really like the way you thought through that. It's very Madisonian of you to think of it that way. I would say, just in preparation for tomorrow's hearing, try to think a little bit more about how these questions affect you and your situation. A lot of this isn't just sort of things that are theoretical that we, think about in the abstract, but they do have an effect on you. And, it changes based on where you live, and, think through, individual people and in these different systems of representation, how do they feel represented? Do they think their voice is getting heard through these different systems? So just think through that a little bit. And I'm trying to go through my notes here. I liked the phrasing, the House is closer to the people and the Senate is closer to the government. I think that was one line that really stuck out to me as well. So I think that, there's a lot of really deep thought that goes into statements like that. And I really commend you guys for your performance today. Thank you.
I'm going to be very quick so that Eugenia can get back to either hitting a home run in a softball game or supporting this community activity, whatever. I thought you did a very good job. And you hit all the points that we in your initial 4-minute presentation, and then you responded very well to the comments that were made about or the questions that we ask you individually. Congratulations to you. You have a wealth of knowledge. I would only suggest to you that you consider always giving us the other side. Like in your opening, when you gave us the advantages and disadvantages of particular topics, you may want to do the same thing when we ask you questions. You may have a particular point you want to make, but also give us the other side of the argument, the counterpoint to that. Overall, you did a very good job. You clearly demonstrate your wealth of knowledge that you have and your leadership capabilities, and please continue to utilize those to benefit your school and your community in the state of Florida. Thank you very much. Good luck to you, and congratulations.
I'd like to commend you on a good job on your presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed how you were very direct in your presentation, which is good because it makes it easy to follow. And so I commend you on that. And also just for, like I said, your dedication here, despite technical difficulties, despite different things, you're still able to pull it off together. And I think that shows a lot of dedication, a lot of perseverance on both your parts. And so I commend you on that. Just for an enhancement to your presentation is just always add examples to your responses. I think it adds more depth to the response. Like for instance, when we were during my question, and I was going to ask it, had one more time, just 2 more minutes. It would have been said, like, in regards to the smaller states would be ignored, and so it'd be great to say that they're ignored, but also provide examples why. It's well, all the bigger states won't allow my state to have a voice. They'll vote down all my bills. They'll something add to that to show, like, when it means ignore, this is what it means, and this is how it affects smaller states. I think that will just move your presentation to another level in doing that. But overall, good job. I commend you on that, and thank you so much for your dedication. Appreciate it. Thank you.